we're approximately, I say this, 2 weeks away. This Saturday would be 2 weeks. And it's going to be interesting for this first week. We're going to look at the picks for this week and a little bit more. It's going to be right now on Sports Hour. What's going on, Alexander Thomas here. Welcome to another season 2 this season. We are still about 2 weeks away for it. It's week 1 we are talking about here. It is going to be a very interesting week. You can see what's going to happen here. Of course, we are. It's going to be actually there's a lot of things going on this week, and a few things that happen with the actual roster. If we go to the actual NBL roster, there was 2 players the Panthers signed. No other players were signed by any other team. I guess no one plays. Zoe Helen was signed, and Alexis Clark-Rose was signed. Both defensive backs. And all the players have been signed at this point. They had until the end of January, but all the players have gone throughout the entire time. So I'm going to talk a little bit before we get into this about the actual way it works. I have another. Still have a schedule, still, and all that, and it's as well. The roster's full, and if they want to sign more players, they can do that up until the end of week 1. And this roster and all that will be all the roster, and then everything up there will be predicted. You can go to the draft grades as well. What I thought for each of the actual draft portion would be. This is their overall rating. This is their after penalty rating. It means if they had not enough players, then they have penalties. I don't think there's any teams that have penalties. There might be one. Well, there's one team. There's one team that has a penalty. So they have the Hawks. And just to give you an idea, but it's Hawks and Warriors both have a penalty. It is not required they have it, but they should sign players before it because the fact is that it's going to be much more difficult for them. Let's talk about each team's playoff chances. I'm going to go to their actual roster, what their actual chances. Playoff chances, I'm going for each one of these. For the NBC North, it's going to be an interesting year for them. Prediction is that the Legends will get the division. The Panthers will make it, but will have a 10-6 record, not exactly the best hits. And the Knights will happen to get in there on the wild card with an 8-8 record. As for the NBL West, the Pirates are predicted to it. They have the easiest schedule, so it's not too difficult for it. The Dragons should get in, but they're going to get in off of a lot of buys, a lot of things always. the Dragons, the Bears, and the Knights are all going to be really good. It's going to come down to really who wins the division. And the Dragons have a slightly better record off prediction. The NBL East has the Bulldogs, the Angels, the Browns, the Saints, and the Falcons. These are all pretty bad. The Browns I have currently as predicted to get the division, but they're going to get it as 10-5, 10-6, so not exactly a. Although they will be undefeated in the division, that will probably they probably won't do very well outside the division. The NBC South has the Foxes, the Hawks, the Ravens, the Tigers, and the Bears. Currently have the Foxes winning the division with the Hawks getting in there off against. Those are the teams that are getting into it off of for the NBC. The AFC, we've got the Leland Cats, the Jets, Lightning, Werewolves, and the Athens. Currently, it's predicted that the Leland Cats will win the playoffs. Will win the division. I think I actually had that a little bit different. This is actually probably not really accurate. Currently, I would say the Lightning probably have a good chance to do it. I do have them losing a few games. I would say that it will look like the Leland Cats will probably actually not do it. The Lightning will be the ones that may clinch the division, and the Leland Cats will be second, the Jets will be third. It's hard to say whether these teams will actually do it. For the AFC West, I do have the Supermen, the Bulldogs, the Beatles, the Stars, all making it. The Huskies, who were the name Westville before, and Chargers will not make it off of poor records. And to be honest, the previous years, any teams that have changed their name did not do well in their actual previous year. I still don't think the Chargers are going to do well. They're not going to do terrible. They were last year, and I don't think they're going to do super well for this one. For the ABL East, we got the Warriors, the Lynx, the Otters, the Packers, and the Lions. I think the Lynx are going to go back-to-back years and make it back to the bubble. They're going to lose week 1, according to what I predicted, but it's going to be a very tough. They have a really easy schedule. Otherwise, they should be able to win most of those other games. The Warriors are going to be 12-5. They're going to make playoffs off of that. As for the AFC South, everyone in the division is going to be terrible. UNC is the one that's got the best possible record, I think. Even though I think the Techs are going to be undefeated in the division, they're going to be missing the playoffs by literally one game. All right, now let's get to what we have for the records, for the team rosters and all that. The playoff records for the last couple of years. There are still, I think, there are currently 4 teams that have not been to the playoffs. Bears have not been to the playoffs. The Techs, no. The Kings have not been to the playoffs. They have a half record. The Packers have never been to the playoffs. And the Huskies, what was Westville, have never been to the playoffs either. They actually have had decent records, though, because they've had 105 games. Even though their records were not Pacific, they just missed the playoffs back in 2017, and they basically just missed the playoffs last year too. They barely missed it. They're actually in a good position of actually doing certain things this year. As for the Panthers, they have the best overall record ever. The team that has the worst theoretical record is the Saints. They have the worst record, and they're right below them. However, they have made the playoffs several times. They made it back several years ago, and unfortunately, Saints have not done well since then. there is only one team in the NBL that has done theoretically worse than the past, have not had a record that was but made it to the playoffs and didn't have a really good record, and that was, I believe, correctly, the Lightning, right? No, it wasn't the Lightning. The Lightning had an 18-0 record. I believe it was the Browns. The Browns are the only team they have made the playoffs, but they haven't had any good record. Hopefully, they do well this year. And of course, if anyone wants to take over a team, you guys can still do that. They're still free agents, including Grace Tomey, who was cut from the Colts. The ratings are right here as well if you want to go look at them. And it'll be just to give you guys an idea. Any of these players here were not drafted. Were not actually in the draft. All these players were not put into the draft in the first place. Anyways, let's talk about teams that we think are going to do well, teams that are not going to do too well. Start off with the Legends. I think the Legends are going to do decently. I don't think they're going to do great. I think they're going to do probably the best in that division because of how difficult the division is, but only by a little bit. I also think they're going to probably make it into the playoffs as not the number 1 seed, but I would say probably number 4 seed. Not going to be in the best position for that. I don't really want to talk about any of these other teams just because it gives you an idea, though. Teams I think are going to do really terribly. I still have to say, I'm sorry to anyone who thinks the Chargers are going to do good. I don't have the Chargers doing well. They don't have enough. They have not enough experience. They just need some confidence. Maybe next year when they have their picks and all that. Teams I think they're going to do really well, like the Beagles. I think the Beagles are going to do really well this year, along with the Dogs. I think the Dogs are going to do really well this year, even though they are not exactly. They're not particularly making the playoffs. All right, let's talk about the weekly predictions. Billy, John, Runner, Dog, and Puppy, those are abbreviation names, have already put their picks in. I'm going to go and talk about every game. What I think is actually going to happen. What I think is that you're going to go here. And it's actually going to be very interesting. The first game we have is going to be the Hawks and the Foxes. Both these teams are actually very good. They're very good teams. Both of them have pretty good records overall. Looking at the playoffs for each one of them, the Hawks have made the playoffs, and so I don't know what I'm looking at that for. But looking at their prediction in here, I would say this is going to be a very tough game. I would say this is going to go either way, and honestly, I think it's interesting. The thing is, the Foxes did a lot better than last year. Only 1 game difference, but I think overall it's going to be an interesting for it. The Hawks don't really have the experience. They've got several rookies. Most of their team is going to be rookies, and I don't see how that's going to. I don't know how that's going to work for them. I think they're going to do decently. I think honestly, with some of these good players they've got, they're going to do very well. But unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like to me that they're going to have it. As for the Foxes have also a very young team, but they've got some pretty good experience. It's, again, young team. This game is going to be very tough to even see who win. I would say this is probably going to be a really low-scoring game, and I'm going to say right now, I think it's going to come out to whoever has the better rookies, and that's really it's going to be. It's really what I think is going to happen. when it comes down to it. I'm going to pick the team that has Raven Knob is one of the best players that they've ever had. She's been on several teams. I'm going to have to say it's going to be a super of a close game. I'm going to go with the Foxes here. But it is so tough to go with either team for that reason. I don't think there's any way to actually go with it. We've got the Bears and the Ravens. Bears and Ravens are in the same division. Most of the teams are in the same division for week 1. Bears also have no experience on their team. I just want to point out they do not have any experience. They've got some really good rookies. I will say that. That might be what helps them out in the end. But as for that, they're missing experience. They have Samuel Kumiko, who's the 9 overall, has one of the best ratings ever. But it just comes down to me that I think they're going to have a really hard time. Actually, I think week 1 will be not the week for them. Even playing, and especially since they're playing away. That doesn't really mean much, considering that they basically all have. They're all going to be playing at the stadiums. Versus the Hawks, I believe it was. Was it the Hawks? No. Versus the Ravens. Honestly, the Ravens have much more experience. They have a wider variety of players. I have to say the Ravens have some really, really strong players. They have some good rookies as well. I mean, obviously every team has rookies now. They've got Stevie Roberts, which is one of the best players that team has ever had. Connor, which is, it's 2 of those players that were retiring at the end of this year. Derek Thomas is great. It's going to come down really to. I'm going to say the Ravens have a better roster size. I'm going to go with the Ravens here. It could go. I think honestly that game could go either way. We got the Tigers. Tigers have Grace Thomas, and they have no one else really. No, they got a pretty good, strong elemental things. There have the Twins. Those Twins worked out really well. They played for the same team. They did not play for the same team. They played for 2 different teams, but they played against each other several times, and it was a huge hunt. Not exactly the best rating teams, but also they have some of the best players. They got Summerfield, which is the 2nd season. She was suspended one year for a few games last season. But it comes down to a lot of things for that game. And honestly, the Tigers do have a very strong border. As for the Giants, they have a very strong, solid team. They've got some good leaders. They've got great players. They got some of the best players. They've got a lot of really high-ranked players. They got 2 99 overalls. They got 95. They got another 99 right here. I think this team is going to absolutely demolish them in this sense. Yeah, I have to go with the Giants here. And no, I do not want to do that. But I think, honestly, this is going to be a very, very one-sided game, unfortunately. Mostly because they got 1, 2, 3, 4. They got a lot of 9 overall players. Unless somehow all the Giants players get injured in practice, I don't see this as being a. It just should be a pretty much one-sided game for the Tigers game. If it were later in the season and I could figure out things, I probably could say, yeah, this team's not going to do well. I say we just did. But because of all the players I've got on that team right now, I will say right now they're going to have a really strong season. Let's talk about the Chargers. Chargers were the worst team last season. They've got a very wide variety of players. And they've got a very young team. Did the rookies not get signed? Oh, so there was a few teams that haven't. All three of these teams have not yet put their things in. They've got time. Yeah, but it's going to come down to a lot of things. Chargers told me they said they're going to pay each of their players $3,000, which is a pretty decent rating. What did they say? They're playing $2,500 for each one of their players. Supermen are paying $7,000 for the first player, $2,000 for each other, $2,000 for both of those players, and then $3,000 for that player. Richards, they're paying what? They're paying $7,000 for. They're paying $3,000 for each of the other players. So those are just to give you an idea. The roster doesn't mean much of a difference. I do think the Chargers have a very strong balance, but unfortunately, they just don't have the means. I don't see them doing very well when it comes to a team like this, especially when they're playing someone like the Beagles. Beagles have one of the strongest teams in the league, I would say. They have experience. They got some really good players, and I don't have any confidence in it. I think the rookies are probably going to be staying out a lot of this game, or not rookie, at least not playing much, maybe in the first quarter, because of this team, because of the team they're playing against. I think they will play them a lot more in later games, but as of right now, I do say the Beagles are definitely winning this game. It should be one-sided. We got the Packers and the Lions. The Packers have one of the most experienced players, Matty Keogh. One bid for $5,000, but they got some really strong players. Even though they've got a pretty interesting rookie, they got Rolf Senior, which is one of the best players that I think was actually from the draft itself, for at least in the early second round. I think honestly they have a really strong team. The bad news for them is they don't have any real leadership. That's not at all true. Sarah Wright is a great player, but she is not a leader. Matt Keogh is a good player. Again, not a leader. Hank Ryan he's never been a leader. So we have got no leadership on this team, which is part of the reason they don't have a lot of games. Hope Wright is their best leader. Unfortunately, she's leaving after the end of the season. So, yeah, this is not exactly a good team for us. As for the Lions, they've got a really strong basis of this one. Their team is it's pretty average outlets, but they've got pretty good amount of experience, which is great. They've got Samuel Cross, who was on the Panthers as well, but Samantha Bishop also on the Panthers at one point. $15,000 at this one point, but they've got some of the best experience. I think it's going to be experience that's going to be what's going to win inside this game. I'm going the Lions. Puppets being optimistic, so I think we're going to have to say it. We got the Lions and the Legends. They got the L's. The Legends, fairly new team. They've got a fairly young team as well, but they have a pretty decent average team. They've got some good leaders. They got Sarah Rogers. They got Clementine, Bradford. Both of those players are absolutely. Billy Moe is a great leader. I mean, honestly, this is absolutely. They've got a pretty average team off the ends. Zay Presley is not really a leader, but he is a great player. He scores a lot of points throughout the season. So honestly, defensively, I think they're going to have a much better stats than the Lightning. Now, I do think the Lightning are going to do well, but the thing is, they don't really have a good position. And I think, honestly, even though they're going to have a great units, I do think they work well together. They're going to still be a higher scoring team. I would say probably 80 points at least each game. They just don't have the whole full balance. I think getting in it for week one, they were just not going to be able to do what they needed to. Even though they've got all the players put together, I think the Legends are going to do slightly better off this one, but they have a much better team. I think, honestly, this is going to be a very tough game. I am going to pick against everyone else. I'm saying the Lightning win this game. I think it's going to be absolutely the closest game you're going to see. Panthers and Knights. Can I go what the game of the week is? Thank you. This is what the biggest rivalries ever. They've got their full roster minus one player. They got aliens. They have everybody. The thing is, they don't have. Panthers are in one problem. They have one big problem, and that is they have no insured defense. They signed 4 players. Their defensive player. They didn't have any defense because they lost it. They lost all but G. Garcia. And they lost and James and they got 2 other players there, but they just don't have it. They're not the leaders basically. They don't have a defensive position. I think it's going to be coming down to really who, if they can get a defense, put their defense together. The Knights have a much wider team, a much better team. They have a much lower overall. Okay, we can always say that. But they drafted really well. They did brilliant. The only player that they don't really need is Julian Klein, who's a 68 overall. They probably could just cut that person. He didn't. She didn't play much last year, did she? No, she didn't play much last year. She played. She was more of like a third string person. But they've got great players. Honestly, this is going to be a tough game. I think the Panthers are going to have a hard time against Bean's team. Now, if we look back at the actual division here, the Panthers have, in the last, since 2016, they've played, Panthers have not lost against them. They've actually had only 6 games where the Panthers were. There were actually several of those games where the Knights didn't score a single point, but that's because they have it. I think with one good player, they might have a chance. Suicide Thatcher, another player, is a great. I think with the proper leadership and the proper units, and maybe cutting Julian Klein, I think the Knights do have a good chance. But the thing is, there's one other problem. The Panthers have never lost week 1. Never. Even back in before 2016, they have never lost week 1. And unfortunately, I think that's going to stay. I'm going to say the Panthers win this one because they do have a stronger outside team. We got the Cardinals and we've got we have the Cardinals and the Dogs. It's another divisional game. Another one. Cardinals are really young. They did terrible last season. They won 2 games, and one of those is when it's the Chargers, I believe. So, yeah, they have a very low team. I don't know if they have much experience. Samuel Armstrong's their most experienced player, and he's not really a leader. They actually had a lead on Lindy Armstrong last season, who's also been there for a few years. But unfortunately, this is not going to be this is going to be a very low team. I think the Dogs have a much better strategy off of this. Looking at the Dogs have a much better. They drafted a whole lot better. They did it really well. I think honestly, there's no chance that the Dogs lose this week. Sorry, Dogs are gonna win this one. Again, Puppy's being optimistic. So we've got ourselves the Pirates and the Kings. Pirates have the easiest schedule, and also probably one of the best teams. They've had to bet one of the better teams. They've got some great players. They actually end up getting Antijobi, who was drafted in round 4. She was could have been drafted in round 1, but she wasn't drafted in round 1. Maybe no one liked her. No one thought she was going to be good. She's absolutely going to, I think, honestly, with a few of the players on the team that are being paid a lot more, this is going to be a really good team. As for the Kings, on the other side of the spectrum, they have some experience, but most of the team is pretty young. I don't even know what it is. I think Kings do not have enough to win this week. I'm fortunately going to say the Pirates do have to win this. Going to win this week. We got the Indians and the Dragons. Okay. Indians have a pretty experienced team. I think honestly it's a really well in. They've got some great players. Yes. They're, however, going to have a little bit of problem. They're not going to be a good they're not going to be a great defense because most of the teams are rookies. I think early on they're not going to be one of those players that is going to say, hey, we're going to be really good defensively. I think early on it's not going to be one of those teams that's going to go, hey, we're going to be defensive. We're going to be the top 10. No, they might be. Hey, I can see them being really good in offense, but otherwise, I think it's the Dragons. On the other hand, they've got literally no experience. They got they got a few players. I got Zach Jones and Faith Darker, both by the way. Faith Jones, by the way, the captain of that team. Yeah. They don't really have wins. I think honestly, early on in week 1, Dragons don't win. I'm going to give the Indians the win. I think, honestly, everyone thinks the Dragons are going to do better because the Indians do generally not win week 1, but I think the Indians are going to do well week 1. Angels and Bulldogs. What was the game of the week? Thank you. So we had the game of the week. Is, in fact, I'm going to change the colors to this one. The links, and I'm going to change it to a different color, though. This is the game of the week. Normally, they don't like to do divisional wins, but that's what they're going to do for this week. Angels and Bulldogs. Let's see what we got here. The Angels have a very well-balanced team. That is all we got to say. Their rookies will probably not take over here. I think, honestly, they'll probably stay with players they had in previous years versus the Bulldogs, who are probably going to be a great team as well. They've got some great players. They've got some good. Sarah Fairchild has pretty much killed the games last year. That was not right words. And then at Claire Dolan, both those players are absolutely great. And by the way, they played each other. They played together. Sarah Fairchild and Claire Dolan both played each other. Played on the blue team. Is that correct? The green team. And this is absolutely going to be a great combo because they did play each other. They've actually played with each other. Honestly, this is tough. I'm going to give the Bulldogs the win here, but I think the Angels are going to put up a really good fight. We got the Huskies, the Westville team. Westfield Huskies have some really good players, and honestly, a kind of a young team is the only thing I would say. They're pretty young, and the bad news is the Browns. They're not young. They're not even close. Uh, well, okay, reverse that. They're much more experienced, and they kind of know what they're going with. They got some great players. I think, honestly, this is going to be a very interesting range. They got George K. George K was one of the best players ever to play the game. The problem is they don't have any balance around it. And honestly, this is going to be a tough game. I am going to say, everyone's picked the Huskies. Yeah, I'm going to say the Huskies are going to win this game. I do think it's going to be a much closer game than we think. But I'm saying that. The Colts and Dolphins. Dun dun dun. Yeah, Colts have everybody, and they just have no idea what they're going to do. They got some really good players. They got good leaders. They have some new players. They got rid of one of the best leaders they ever had. So great job for that. They have a pretty well-balanced team, and I think they're going to have some decent hits. Then they got the Dolphins. Yeah, Dolphins they're kind of in a good position. They got some good players. They got a good answer. They, however, really haven't worked well together. I think, honestly, it's going to have to be one of the rookies to step up and actually get some points for them. Sure, these two players, there's Eli Jewell and Greg Olney, are both really good players. But honestly, they're going to have a new leader, a good leader. These players, Eddie Green and Kelly Hood, are not leaders, and they're not going to be leaders going into this. Xavier Dallas Sr. is the closest person to even have that. He's probably even being a leader. This is tough. I'm going to give the benefits and say it's going to be tough. It's going to be a really close game. I'm going to give the Colts the win, but it is going to be a very tough game. Tex and UNC. We got the Tex. Most widespread team. They've worked together. They were the first team, one of the first teams, by the way, their second team to really get into points before the draft even started. So not counting these players already know how they're going to work together, and I think that's going to be great for them. They'll easily get the rookies in place, especially since they got some good rookies. I don't think there's going to be any problem with that team. As for UNC, the other the Nine-National Cats, they've got a really, really well-experienced team. Those players have not been going. They haven't even got to training camp yet. So, unfortunately, I think early bird gets the worm in this case. I'm going to give the Tex the win. I do think there's a good chance, there's a possibility that UNC does something and actually does really well, but unfortunately I just don't see them doing well. We got the Lynx and the Warriors, the game of the week. And honestly, I will say this is a very good game of the week. We got the Lynx, a really young team, having one good player, really good leader. I think Heidi King will do great putting them together. She's one of the best players. She is a great player, and honestly, if she gets all the leadership together, and with these two players, Rosa Sharp and Ruben Jackson, absolutely will do really well. Not to mention, having great rookies off this one. Sure, they're not the best players, but think of it this way: the Lynx won the Ball Bowls last season, and those players were the teams that actually did that. Versus we have the Warriors, who are right next to it by coincidence, don't really have the leaders. They don't have it. They have two really good players, and that's it. They don't really have a team. I think honestly, the Warriors they kind of shut down from going into last week. If you look back at the playoff records just for the Warriors, They were 10-6 last year. They were decent, but we put it this way: they were kind of saved by a few of these good players. A few of the players that were probably gonna lose these teams last year. They aren't great. I have to say, unfortunately, I don't think the Warriors are going to do it. I'm giving the Lynx the win. I honestly see the Lynx going pretty much most of the way. We got the Falcons and the Saints. Very wide experience. I think, honestly, they're going to be one of those teams that's going to start pretty slow, but they're going to do really well later in the season. I think with the rookies they got, absolutely going to crush the It's. I would say they're probably going to be top 10 starting week 2, not week 1. I don't think they're going to do week 1 because of some of these games. But I think in week 2, they're going to be one of the best teams. I think they're probably going to be like 13th. As for the Falcons, they have a lot of experience. They have a lot of hits. This is a tough one. Falcons did terribly last year, went 2-14, but honestly, they shouldn't have. There were a lot of those games that they got really close with. Really, really close. And I have to say, I think the Falcons are going to take the win here. Yeah, I'm going to go with Falcons here, winning this game. We got the Jets and Leland Cats. I do think the Leland Cats are a very, very young team. They made the playoffs. They were one of the teams that made the playoffs. If you look at the teams in it, Leland Cats went 15-1 last year, losing only to the Panthers. Only team they lost against was the Panthers. Then they lost against the Lynx. So yeah. I have to say this is going to be a very interesting game. They are kind of young, but they are in a really. They know how the team works. They do well. I think honestly, this team is going to be absolutely really good. But then they got to face the Jets. Jets are very similar. They've got a little more experience. They got Raven Long on the team. Yeah, this is going to be a tough game. I think this is going to be easily. They're going to be at least 100. Each of them are going to be 100 points. This is probably going to be a game that goes to overtime. I'm going to say right now, I'm going to give the Leland Cats the win. But I do think there is a very good chance that this game is going to be going to overtime, and it could be the Jets that win it. We got the Ethan and the Werewolves. Werewolves. Here they are. They're over here. They got a really strong basis. They're going to be losing Hannah Thomas. At the end of the season, they got Sammy Summer, which is going to be another really. I think honestly, she's going to be end up being the leader because I think Hannah Thomas is going to just kind of go back and say, I'm going to stay on the team, but I'm not going to be a leader myself. And I think honestly, this is going to be a huge team. Max Rushing is not. Max Rushing is not making $1,000, right? Yeah, I'll say he's not making. Minimum contract's $2,000. May actually upgrade those things. Okay, so yeah, this is going to be a very interesting. I think the Werewolves are going to have a lot of experience when it gets to playing against the Ethan. The Ethan, by the way, are the only team to ever make playoffs with a losing record. They have very little experience, but honestly, this is going to be a really good game. I'm going to say, with Bethany Richards, they're going to get really high score. Both these players, Aishan Orborn is going to absolutely do really well. Brad Pitt is going to be great. This is going to be a tough one. I know the guys are going werewolves. I have to say, even though I think the werewolves are going to have a slightly better early game, I'm going to give the Athens the win here. I do think the Athens are going to have a better chance of winning this game. They got a more roundabout team. I think it's. We got the Superman, the Stars. The Stars, they're really young. That's not much to say about them. They just don't have the leadership they need. Much unlike the Superman, who do have a great leadership. They've got a good around-out team. They got more options. Sarah Noble being one of the players, probably going to be the leader. I don't see them winning. I'm gonna go with Superman. I'm going with the Superman winning this game. Some people are giving them confidence. Then the last game, the Otters. Ooh, also, can I get the? They're rated 3,000 Ts. Yeah. They're really interesting. I mean, honestly, I will say the Otters at the very good. They've got great leadership. They've got a great amount of teams. It's going to come down really to how the Bobcats season goes. I think the Bobcats are going to be a very good team. I don't think they're going to have quite the leadership skills, though. I'm going the Otters here, and honestly, and if you want to take your own predictions, you can put those down in the comments down below. In my personal opinion, this is going to be one of the most interesting weeks. Obviously, we don't have any clue. Last season, if you look at something, these are the teams that made the playoffs. These are the teams that made the playoffs. All the teams that have Z's won the division. As for the playoffs, I want to talk about the playoffs real quickly because Bulldogs actually went with an 8-8 record last season. They won their division. They were one of the few. Yeah. So here's how the playoffs work. I don't have a playoff bracket. I don't think. That's 24 years ago. This is the idea. In week 1, this is not. Let me go ahead and just give one of the better ones. Because this is, hide this sheet. Let me go ahead and show you what it was several years ago in 2024. This is the idea how it works. It's exactly like this. They'll play 5 games, or at least a minimum 3. And the majority of those games will move on to the next round. Then the next round and so on. It's going to be the first seed plays the last seed, which happens to be the 8th seed. The second seed plays the 7th seed. The third seed plays the 6th seed, and the 4th seed plays the 5th seed. It's a little bit like the NBL, the NFL roster, except that there's actually no buys. There's no buy. You don't get a buy for this. And there'll be 4 different stadiums, obviously, in week 1. Yeah, this is how it works. You play, and then there could be up to 5 games. If games go 3-0 like this first one here, then that will be not needed. It's not needed. It will not be played. If it's tied after the end of those 3 games, if they're the end of those 4 games, because there's 4 games, then if it's tied, then to play the 5th game. Whoever wins that one will move on to the next round. If by chance it won't be tied, so I'll explain how overtime works in a second here, because then you play the next game, then you play the next game, and so on. The next game will go to the end. Whoever has the highest seed will play the lowest seed, and it's still going to be like the NBL roster. Then you play over here the division, which would be the conference championship. The highest seed, the lowest seed. The only teams left. Then you'll have the Ball Bowl, which is over here. And whoever is the highest two teams, they do this. And I will point out the Lynx, as you can see, won the first three. Over here, they won 3-1 in this game. Then let's see if we look at this first one. That was the first one. Over here, the Lynx, obviously, they won all three. So it just depends on how it's. It could be anything. I'm going to go ahead and close this now. But that's how the playoffs work. The difference is, I'm going to explain how overtime works because there's some changes that I didn't make in this year. If a game goes to overtime, it is sudden death, kind of. The way it works is what you're going to do is you're playing your games. You play, so you get to overtime. It's tied. Let's say it's 100-100, just to give you an answer. The Hawks are playing the Bobcats. Those teams will have one possession, well, 5 possessions total. They'll play each other. If you score, then it goes to the near stand. If you don't score, then it continues. It goes until a team can't catch up, or it's over. If at that point it is over, when the both teams score, it's 112-112, then the game ends in a tie. There's more chances that a team could happen like that. That is how it works going into the season. Obviously, if you guys want to take a team, you can look at each of these. All 3 of these will be uploaded. I'm going to go ahead. I think it did all 3 of these, yes. And there will be another one as well that won't be uploaded until week 2. Is this one right here? It's just gonna. This is what it shows you. It just tells you. I will put this up actually. These 4 will all be up. Just to show you what's actually predicted. You won't be able to do anything with editing this one. This will just tell you the strength of schedule, which is what this is. You'll be able to tell the season is. You can go to each one of them. You can't change anything, but that's of course if you change anything, obviously what has. Then you can see the rosters on this one here, draft grade, the points total. Any free agents you want to sign. If you want to sign something, you have to go to nbl@sportshour@gmail.com. Send that to me and say, hey, I want to get this. I want to take control of this team, and I want to get this player. That's all you have to do. And then I'll respond back to you. At that time. And that's basically all there is. Every team is still in the playoffs in the course of right now. But the playoffs happen, there will be something starting week 2. Obviously, it won't happen week 1 because we'll be tied. Everyone will be tied. But then we'll say if the playoffs happen today, this will be missed. I might be in week 3 because the context is there's notes and the division and the rankings. That is it for Sports Hour. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to keep your game on. And my webcam wasn't in a position. Anyways, don't forget to keep your game on. I'll see you next video.